as we start, today is our Don't Waste Your Summer Day. Don't waste your summer. Saying that, don't waste your summer, probably brings up all sorts of things. It's whatever you typically enjoy doing with your summer. Maybe there's projects around the house you want to get done, traveling to the mountains, to the beach, time in the yard, in the pool, cool walks in the evening, time around a campfire. Maybe your ideal summer is just enjoying the fact that you live in this day and age and you can sit in the air conditioning. Maybe that's the way you enjoy summer. There are so many things you could do. You could smoke meat. You could grow vegetables in a garden. Any number of things. So many things you could do this summer that if there's something you don't do, you'll feel like, well, maybe I wasted my summer. A whole summer passed without doing that thing or not doing it enough. Schools have finished up, and whether you're in school or not, whether you have kids in school or not, there's a psychological reality, at least for me, that when school lets out, summer is in. Summer is in, and now school's out, so summer's here, and I want us to think about how can we not waste our summer? How can we not waste our summer? My goal is not to get you to take out your calendar, wipe it clean, and start from scratch. My goal is not to get you to change your plans, but instead to get you to expand your plans just a little bit as we look at this next part of Matthew. I want us to consider one important question. What would Jesus do with my summer? Ask yourself that question. What would Jesus do with my summer? I had a green WWJD bracelet in 5th and 6th grade. It was the thing back then. Everybody was wearing these WWJD bracelets. The whole point was to remind myself whenever I looked at it, no matter the situation, to ask what would Jesus do in any given moment? If my siblings are being mean to me, what would Jesus do? If I got mad at my parents, well, what would Jesus do? If I had the chance to cheat on my homework or on a test, what would Jesus do? The situations as a 5th or 6th grader are pretty simple. Now, as adults, we ask that question of our summer because we don't want to waste our summer. It's just a fact that so often in the church, summer is downtime. Summer is off time. Things stop in summer. We wait for them to start back up in the fall. That's just kind of the way it is. Some ministry takes a back seat so often in the summer. But if we honestly answer this question, what would Jesus do with my summer? We instinctively know that take a break isn't the answer. Take a break isn't the answer. So we don't want to let up. We want to lean in. Churches and Christians alike ought to get after it if they ask that question. And so if Jesus could trade places with you, what would he do with your summer? Today's not meant to be deep. It's meant to be direct and doable. Direct and doable. So look at Matthew chapter 9, beginning in verse 35. And Jesus went throughout all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom and healing every disease and every affliction. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest." So the same response answers both questions, both how do we not waste our summer and what would Jesus do with my summer? And I think to put it very succinctly and very, very simply, very memorably, I think he would put compassion in action. He would put compassion in action. Matthew is bookending this section of the gospel. Consider how we started this section in Matthew chapter 4, verse 23. It told us that Jesus was going around teaching, preaching, and healing. And then in Matthew 9, verse 35, we just read, Jesus was going around teaching, preaching, and healing. And between those two verses, Jesus was in fact teaching, preaching, and healing. It revealed who he was. Physical healings authenticated the spiritual reality of the need for the people. These miracles confirmed Jesus' authority in many ways. And this attracted a lot of attention. He had a following. but not necessarily followers. He had people who wanted to see the next trick more than they really cared about the whole thing with being spiritually sick. All these people are coming to him. All these people are following him. They're cheering for him. And yet they don't realize who he is. Now, he could have gotten mad about that. He could have been annoyed by them. Especially when we realize if these people don't know that he's a Messiah, their lives probably aren't all together. There's probably a few things about these people he could complain about. But instead, Jesus shows compassion. Jesus shows compassion. Look again at verse 36. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them. The crowds. Like we said, a big following. He's been trying to get away from them. Each time he healed somebody, he would say, "Now don't go and tell people. Don't go and tell people." And last week we said that wasn't because he wanted to keep it a big secret in the sense of not getting word out about him, but he didn't want people coming to him for the wrong thing. He didn't want all these people coming to him just for a physical healing. The nation needed to desire their Messiah. And so he's working toward that goal. But now part one of the mission is complete. He's revealed himself as Messiah. He's authenticated himself as Messiah. He's done enough to prove it. And so now we see Jesus' heart really come through. He has compassion for them. And of course, we've seen him being compassionate throughout this time. But now we have it said very clearly, when Jesus saw the crowds, he had compassion for them. That word compassion in our modern English is kind of a soft feeling of like, aw. But back then, this word in Greek, it actually comes from the word splankna, which kind of sounds ugly. It actually refers to the gut. You can kind of get that sense from it, splankna, the gut. It's a gut feeling. Not like an inclination, but a gut feeling like, hey, I've heard something, and it impacts me so deeply. It impacts me to the gut, to the core. This is genuine. This is deep, feel it in my gut sympathy for them. You know, there's a difference between hearing about something bad that happened to somebody you don't know. You're like, oh, no, that's awful. But when you hear about something bad that happened to somebody you do know, it just makes you react different. You can feel it. That's the idea of this compassion. One is bad, but the other one, you just know it deep within yourself. And look at who he's compassionate toward. He had compassion for them because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Those harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. A sheep without a shepherd will so easily wander into any given situation. And as a result, it will be harassed, it will be helpless. A sheep without a shepherd will get into things it shouldn't get into. It will follow things it shouldn't follow. The picture here is the people of Israel. They're being harassed and helpless. They're getting into things they shouldn't get into. They're following things they shouldn't follow. And the religious leaders are pointing them to rightness rather than righteousness. They're saying, hey, follow all these rules, and then here's a few more rules to follow, but they're never pointing them to God the Father. So all they're doing is getting beat up for not following all these rules and never being pointed to the Father. They've gotten so deep into that now the Messiah is here, and so many of them are still wandering around, lost. Messiah has come. So many people see the miracles, but they miss the Messiah. And so Jesus, of course, we know from John, is the good shepherd that the lost sheep need. That was true then, and that's true today. Anybody who doesn't know Jesus is like this. They're wandering around. They're harassed and they're helpless. That means they'll get into stuff. They'll get into stuff. They'll get into lifestyles. They'll get into beliefs, get into religions and addictions and just messes of every kind. They'll do dangerous things and make bad choices and struggle and suffer and be hurt or hurt others in the process. You know what that means? That means they need compassion. That means they need compassion. They need a shepherd. So Jesus uses this language referencing the Old Testament and talking about a sheep without a shepherd. He had told Israel, hey, if you do not follow me, if you continue to neglect me, then I will remove your shepherds. I will make you as sheep without a shepherd. It was something God had threatened back then because people weren't following him. And so now Jesus says, these are like sheep without a shepherd. That tells us, hey, they never came to follow God, which we know to be true. And so God came to them. He sent the Messiah to them. Jesus is concerned about the spiritual needs of these people. The physical healings were important. They were impressive. They proved who Jesus is. But the thing that draws out this deepest of compassions from him is their spiritual need. Their spiritual need. And so it says he saw these crowds, but who is he addressing, really? I mean, who's in the crowd? Is it murderers? Yeah. Is it crooks? Sure. Sexually immoral? Yeah, and that includes adulterers just as much as it includes homosexuals and those who look at porn and all sorts of other immoral behaviors. But it includes other people, too, in that crowd. It's grandmas and grandpas and aunts and uncles and moms and dads and husbands and wives and sons and daughters and best friends and neighbors and coworkers. Jesus is looking at a crowd of people who don't know him. All sorts of people. They can be categorized into all those groups and a whole lot of other ones. And yet Jesus' big concern for them, the thing that bothers him the most, is these people don't have anybody to point them to the heart of God. These people don't have anybody pointing them to the heart of God. They're like sheep without a shepherd. They're like sheep without a shepherd. Helpless, literally without help. In Greek, that's the idea of being put down or cast aside. No one's there to pick them up from their sinful existence. And so it's toward these people that Jesus has compassion. But he doesn't just have compassion, because sometimes we have compassion, it just doesn't lead to action. He puts compassion in action. Verses 37 and 38. Then he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. I mean, if we at all doubt Jesus' compassion toward these people, this really clears it up. He didn't say, man, all these sinners, all these heathens, all these people without God, look, they're a problem. He said, they're the opportunity. He said, they're the opportunity. Colson and I really enjoy watching farming videos. There are different YouTube channels of farmers that show you what they're doing, and that's just one of the things we enjoy doing together. One thing that's clear is a plentiful harvest is always a great opportunity for the farmer to succeed. It's always a great opportunity. There are problems on the farm with equipment, with weather, with other things, but a plentiful harvest is not a problem, it's a prize. It's something to be valued. And that's how it is with Jesus. Sin is a problem, for sure. But the sinner, these lost people, he or she is a prize waiting to be collected by the all-victorious Savior. And so let's not move on from that truth before we admit how often we think sinners are the problem. As long as we think sinners are the problem, we'll be ineffective. We'll be ineffective. Sin is a problem for people made in God's image. Sin is a problem for people made in God's image. The solution is Jesus. So what's the problem with this plentiful harvest then? What does he say? Why do we need to pray? Well, the problem is there's not enough laborers. There's not enough laborers. That's the problem. That's the issue. Not enough laborers. Well, you're like, well, Jesus created the whole world. Couldn't he just, snap his fingers and make sure everybody goes to heaven? Well, sure. Couldn't he just make a declaration and say, you know what? Everybody's in. Sure, he could have done it that way. But that's not how his kingdom plan works. It's much more personal than that. It's much more personal than God. We have a very relational God. It's a well-known adage. It's not about religion, it's about relationship. And that is so true. That's so true. It's all about knowing Jesus as Lord and Savior. Look in Romans 10. Romans 10, verse 9. If you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. It's a personal thing. It's in your heart. And confess with your mouth. These sinners, these lost sheep, they need to know Jesus. The only way they'll know Jesus is if somebody makes an introduction. So this harvest that he's talking about, these workers that he needs people to go out and make introductions. He needs people that will introduce other people to Jesus. There's no getting to heaven saying, well, my mom was a real good Christian lady. That may be true and good for your mom, but it does nothing for you. It's personal to the individual. There must be people who know Jesus introducing people who don't know Jesus to him. And so we're told the laborers are few. The laborers are few. Now at this point, it's very few because Jesus is just fresh on the scene. It's very few. The people willing to do that work, the people joining in those efforts are few. So what do you do in that situation? He says you pray. You pray. Verse 38, therefore pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his field. Pray. And pray earnestly. Not just a little bit. Earnestly, pleadingly. Let your prayers reflect that deep, in your gut compassion that Jesus has for these people. Nobody pleads one time. Nobody gets down on their knees and says, please. It's always, please, please, please. You're begging. You're earnestly asking. You're earnestly praying. You're pleading. Pray to the Lord of the harvest, the one in charge. Plead for more laborers. God, we need help. God, we need help. The Messiah has come to Israel and people need to know it. We need help making that happen. There is such great need, and yet the big command from Jesus is to pray. To pray. Why isn't it, all right, harvest is plentiful, get out there, fellas, go for it. That's coming. We'll look at that next week. But it doesn't happen without a spiritual alignment to God's purpose. In the very next section, we'll see Jesus send out the 12 disciples. But first, the big command, the big action is pray. Pray. And it's very interesting that the prayer isn't soften the heart of these heathens, soften the hearts of these sinners. The prayer is to create more motivated laborers. If you're not a motivated laborer in the harvest, good luck praying about it without God transforming your heart. Prayer changes us. It puts us in alignment with God. He wasn't going to send out these disciples until they were pleading with God on behalf of the harvest. They might have gone into this thinking, well, surely somewhere there's somebody who's willing to go out there into the harvest. So God find them and use them and strengthen them. But as they pray that over and over and they mean it and they're pleading and they're earnest in their prayers, it's not going to be long before God changes their heart and they realize, hey, it's me you're talking to. It's me you're talking to. I'm the next laborer up. I'm the next one to go out. Don't waste your summer. Don't waste your summer. This passage is Jesus talking about Israel, but we easily understand that the call expands to everyone. Jesus' ministry expanded beyond Israel, to the Jews and also to the Gentiles. We live in a time when many laborers have gone out. It's 2024. This was a long time ago. Many laborers have gone out since then, introducing people to Jesus in faraway lands and introducing to people in their living rooms, close to home. And so we now come to this point where we're reading this passage. We're reading what Jesus did. And if we're honestly asking, well, Jesus, what would you do with my summer? I think this speaks to that. This speaks to that. We now have the opportunity to put compassion in action. Not just any compassion, not just handing out a water bottle every now and then, not just doing something little without anybody ever hearing about the shepherd. It's the compassion of Jesus. A compassion that is stirred by and for people who are lost, like sheep without a shepherd. They're doing the kind of things that lost people will do. One of the most memorable quotes from my seminary career is from Dr. Glenn Kreider, a theology professor, who simply said that. He simply said, "Don't be surprised when lost people act like lost people." Don't be surprised when lost people act like lost people. We so easily get offended by lost people and get surprised when they act like lost people. But lost people are simply acting the way lost people act. The question is, are Christians, these laborers, acting the way they're called to act? Our world, as much as we hear the phrase, our world is not going to hell in a handbasket. Our world is simply full of lost people acting like lost people. And so to come to Matthew 9 and not apply it over these next few months of summer would be a real missed opportunity, an excellent way to waste your summer. And so rather than continuing with inaction, which, let's face it, it's kind of our default position. You know, we come to church, we sing the songs, we hear the stories, we go home. What does that do for the harvest? Let's put compassion in action this summer. Let's ask, what would Jesus do with my summer? So as I said, we're going to be direct but doable. Number one, pray. Pray. Pray that God would send more laborers into his harvest this summer. Pray for churches, for missionaries, for mission trips. Pray that God would send laborers specifically to your community, specifically to your workplace, to your family, to if you have a week of vacation scheduled, that there would be people during your week of vacation reaching those people near you. And as you pray that prayer earnestly, pleadingly, be ready for God to change your heart toward this. Be ready for God to send you out. We are so good at excuses. I say we because it certainly includes me. We are so good at excuses. We have so many reasons not to do something. Lately, it's been on my mind that excuses are easy. Excuses are easy. It is not hard to find a reason not to do this, that, or the other thing. I know it. I make an announcement in church where there's an opportunity to do something, and you're like, yeah, well, I can't really do that because I do the same thing. Challenge yourself to find the reason to do something. God will help you as you earnestly pray for him to send more laborers. And then don't be surprised when you find yourself wanting to be part of that harvesting crew. So pray with earnestness. Plead with God to send workers for the harvest. And then 2, pray about it and then connect with lost people. Connect with lost people. Let's be very clear here. Lost people does not mean bad people. Lost people doesn't mean bad people. It means they don't have a shepherd. They don't know where they're going. This is a part where you get to be as creative as you want. Today we have a very simple demonstration of one way to reach your neighbors. Donuts in the driveway. You set up a table, tablecloth or not, get some donuts, some coffee, some milk, some juice, whatever it is. It can be as simple or as complicated as you want it to be. Hand out flyers. Invite them over. We're doing one at our house in 2 weeks. And then you just talk with each other. You get to know your neighbors. You connect with people. Some of them you may already know. Some of them maybe you haven't met yet. Take a notepad. Write down their names and their numbers. That becomes your contact list and your prayer list. And then do it again for something else. Keep the connections going. Have popsicles on Friday nights. Have Sundays, ice cream Sundays on Sunday evenings. Have a fire pit. Do a s'more night. Have a pizza night, yard game night. Just sit outside and greet people as they walk by. If you don't have next door neighbors, partner with somebody else who does. Or maybe you want to get in on it. Get a gift card to Maple Donuts and hand them out to people who have neighbors so they can get donuts for their neighbors. Whatever it is, we can all be involved in this. If you're away a lot, well, one thing we found up at our cabin is we're getting to know the people in other cabins around up there. So it doesn't have to be where I live. If I'm away, there's people there that need to be reached. There's people there. So don't think, well, I'm away, I can't do it. If you're away, you just get to do it somewhere cool. That's all. And if that's too complicated, then just invite somebody or a couple over for coffee or for breakfast or take them out for a meal. I'm not asking you to host a huge block party, although that would be fun. Why not do that? I'm simply asking you to make a connection with people. If nothing else, you'll improve the neighborhood vibe. All of a sudden, after just one donut's in the driveway, everyone on our street waves to each other. It's great. So simple, so easy. And from connections, you move on to conversations. Maybe you're already connected with friends or family or coworkers, and you can just go right to the conversation. And that sounds kind of scary if you're new to this, but it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. It can be as simple as, so do you go to church anywhere? That's unassuming. Do you go to church anywhere? Or we've never really talked about this. Are you a Christian by any chance? Or did you grow up going to church? Get the ball rolling. And then all you have to say after they give an answer, no matter what the answer is, tell me more about that. Tell me more about that. Just encourage them to keep talking. And be honestly interested. This isn't a put on. Be honestly interested. You're connecting and getting to know another human being. And then you say, well, I'm a Christian. And you give the short version of your story. And that's where you're making the introduction to Jesus. Give the short version of your story. Here's a simple formula. 3 steps. You say, I was, then, and now because of Jesus. Say, I was, what you were like. And then, what happened? Now because of Jesus, what's life like now? You're not telling your whole story. It's not your full testimony. It's not everything that's ever happened to you. It's just a simple way to easily let them know what went on in your life. My example, as a very simple, condensed version, would be, hey, I was a good guy with friends and family and a good life. And, I grew up in the church. But then I realized I wanted to be sure that I was part of God's family. I kept hearing about all this stuff, but I had no assurance that it really applied to me. Now, because of Jesus and trusting Him, I have hope. And it has nothing to do with being a good guy. Nor does it have anything to do with all the times I've failed. It's all because of Jesus being my Lord and the fact that He died and rose again for me, that my sins are forgiven, and I have security for eternity. I know where I'm going. 3 easy steps. That will plant seeds. That will open doors. Just be available to have the conversation. Reach out to your neighbors. If you don't have neighbors, reach out to people you know, friends and family and coworkers. Invite them over. Once you have these conversations and these doors are opening, if they're still open to more discussion, keep having the discussion. Invite them to do a Bible study with you. If you're not comfortable leading them through a book of the Bible, use Right Now Media. Say, hey, why don't we get together once a week? I'll make coffee, bring dessert, and we'll just watch this together. Simple. Keep the conversation going. And then let's not forget to invite them to church. Invite them to church. Tom Rainer has done a lot of church research. And one of the things he found several years ago was that 80% of non-Christians say they've never been invited to church. They've never been directly asked to come to church. But another question on the survey said 80% of non-Christians said they would come to church if they were personally invited. And they thought, wow, look at that. Just one change, just actually inviting somebody. 80% difference. And I thought, well, it's one thing to say you're going to come. Will you really show up? So they dug a little bit deeper. They said, what would it take for those 80% to actually come? And the response overwhelmingly was, well, we would come to church if somebody walked into the building with us. If somebody walked into the building with us. And they thought, okay, well, let's test it. Let's test it. This was through Lifeway, a very large company, so they sent people out all over the country to test this, to see if it would really work. They went to small towns, big cities, all over America for a 2-week period. They had people in these churches invite others and offer to walk with them into the building. You know, pick them up, meet them in the parking lot, meet them at a gas station where they know where that is. You can follow me to the church. However it worked out, 69% of those people showed up. 69% of those people showed up. Then they did it the other way, just to see what would happen if they didn't make that offer to walk in with them. And they invited people and just said, see you there. 12% showed up. 12% showed up. Even this morning, even if it was just 12%, that'd be 2 people regularly. That's pretty good. A little bit of effort, offering to walk in with them, offering to pick them up, or meet at that spot nearby so they can find it easily. I know we like to think that, oh, they're not going to like that, oh, they're going to get upset with me for that. There are a few strong objectors to Christianity and anything church-related, of course. But for the most part, it seems people just need invited. They just need invited, just that little bit of effort. And that tells me that the harvest is still plentiful. The harvest is still plentiful. And if 80% have never been invited to church, it tells me the workers are still few. The workers are still few. And so we do these things to facilitate interaction, to facilitate conversation. And of course, all of this is based on compassion in action. This deep-seated sympathy and compassion for people who are lost, who don't know where they're going. That's a great way to find out, a good conversation starter. So what do you think happens when you die? What do you think happens when you die? That'll tell you, do they know where they're going or not? Are they lost or not? And when we have this compassion, we put it in action. It compels us to act, to pray, and then be moved by God to be part of this. So imagine if summer wasn't wasted. Imagine if we decided we're not going to waste our summer this year. If instead of taking summer off, we put compassion in action, just like Jesus did. My hope and my prayer is that we'll actually try this. We'll actually try this, whether it's here at home or wherever our travels may take us. In fact, there's cards on your table. We're going to do something a little different today. Take a card, take something to write with. You're going to make 2 columns, 1 through 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. In one of those columns, it really doesn't matter which one, but in one of those columns, 1 through 3, write down the names of individuals or families you know you could feasibly interact with this summer, whether that's here at home or wherever you're going. Could be a coworker, could be a neighbor. It could all be neighbors. In the other column, write down 3 ideas of how you can connect with these folks. Could be trying a donuts in the driveway. Could be inviting them over for a campfire. Could be just asking them to lunch. Could be something else you're good at or they enjoy, and you do it together. So you've got a list of 3 names and a list of 3 ways to connect. All I'm going to ask you to do with that is put it somewhere where you'll see it regularly. Could be on your refrigerator, could be in your Bible. Maybe the best thing to do for you is to take a picture of it and make it the background on your phone. One thing I found lately that helps me remember things is taping notes to the dashboard of my car. When I get in, I see it. I'm like, oh yeah, I have to pick up the milk. Well, here, oh yeah, I need to be praying for him. Look at it regularly. Pray regularly about this. Pray that God would use you in the harvest. Within just the last month, or really within the last few weeks, one night Laura received a frantic phone call from a neighbor whose marriage hit a major stumbling block. Through tears, this neighbor asked if Laura would come talk with her. And so they just went for a walk around the neighborhood and talked, and Laura listened and offered advice the best she could. That's not a coincidence. That's the result of very simply but very intentionally putting compassion in action over the course of the time we've lived at our home. We did a donuts in the driveway. We talked with them when we're walking by. And so when a moment hit where they needed help, they knew they could call Laura. This is not all about a desperate plea to grow our church. Sure, if this leads to more people who want to do this with us and reach people and really make compassion in action one of the defining marks of who we are, that's great. But it's truly about just doing it for the kingdom, helping people who are lost become found. Because the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. So let's pray to the Lord of the harvest right now. Heavenly Father, not one of us is in a spot in life, a location with our home, with our work, with our social circles, that is so random that it has no ramifications for your kingdom. Father, I pray that we would take seriously this invitation to pray, to talk to you about this harvest, to know that it's plentiful, that the fields are ripe, and that the laborers are few. Motivate us and move us to talk to people about you, to reach out to our neighbors, just to start those connections, and then to find opportunities for simple conversations. Give us confidence in sharing just the very short version of our story, to tell people what we were like, what happened, and then what life has been like since we began to really take Jesus seriously and trust him. Father, I pray that this would open up a new chapter in the life of our church. Not because we're doing some huge, grand, big scale thing, but because we're recognizing that introductions matter. Give us the opportunity to introduce many people to Jesus this summer. Raise up the laborers. Raise us up. And now, Father, as we think about these lists, we want to pray specifically for these people and these opportunities. So take a few moments just in the quietness of your mind to pray for each person on your list.